You're listening to Shooting Hoops with your hosts, Dia Miller and Adam Drexler.
Welcome back to Shooting Hoops, a podcast about basketball and the Portland Trail Blazers. I'm your host, Dia Miller. I'm here with Adam Drexler, my co-host. Adam, this is episode 8. We're pushing through. We're making our way through these episodes. Going into the
thanks
holidays.
For everyone who's been listening in with us and has stuck in there for all these 8 episodes. So
Yeah.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, like we've said before, we're kind of figuring out our groove and finding our consistency. This stuff takes a little while to kind of iron out. So especially these early episodes before we really have it together, we really appreciate you being here anyway. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube. We're still trying to, do some fun things with YouTube. As we go, we're doing it live. So if you're watching this YouTube video, it's not edited. We are actually throwing things in there as we go, which is a whole new skill that I haven't quite perfected, but we're doing our best here. So if you are listening on podcast platforms, we're trying to paint the best picture we can. We're trying to get these up quick so that they're, they still make sense once they air. Our goal is to do that as quick as possible. So make sure you're subscribed, you're following all that stuff that I tell you to do every week if you listen to this podcast. There has to come a point where I don't say that anymore, right? Like where we just assume people know. So Adam, how are you?
I'm good.
Another week.
There's a storm happening right now. But the podcast must go on. So we're weathering that, and
literally
Christmas is coming up, so I'm excited about that. Are you excited for Christmas?
Yeah, I was actually, before we started this, I was actually upstairs wrapping all my kids' presents. I hate wrapping Christmas presents. I like to buy the presents. I like to watch the kids unwrap the presents. I hate wrap. Do you wrap presents, or do you just chuck them in a bag?
I put it in a bag and I put the paper,
the tissue paper
over the bag, colored paper. I'm not.
Yeah.
I try my
You're
best.
Fancy
I know my skills. I know my.
You know your limitations.
Yeah.
If I didn't have little kids, that's how I would wrap all my presents. Or one year my dad got these cloth bags with drawstrings, and they're reusable. And I was like, this is brilliant. But my kids like the act of ripping off the paper. So
yeah. I do too. I'm right there with them. I do. Better.
Yeah, there's something satisfying about that, ripping it off and throwing it on the floor. And do you throw your paper on the floor? Or do you guys have a bag?
I put it in a pile, and then
a neat pile.
Yeah, but I'm weird about it. Sometimes the pattern or design is so cool. I try my best not to just tear it to shreds. I try to delicately open it as if I'm going to use it again. I don't know.
Right. Okay, so in all fairness, my mom will save. We were laughing about this because she has boxes that you put clothing in before you wrap them. I just wrap the clothing straight up. I don't put it in a box. I'm not fancy like that. But my mom puts it in a box. And I swear to you, we've had those boxes since I was a kid. So she saves them every year. As soon as you open one of the boxes, she's like, don't throw the box in the pile. So it's getting fancy over here. So Christmas this week, it's coming up. But we also have basketball. And that's, really, probably most people don't care what we do with our wrapping paper. They'd rather hear about the
true Christmas gift.
Oh, man. So Blazers are currently 7th in the West. Not as bad as it could be. We've had a couple losses here, and we've had a couple losses to teams that we really should have beat. So it could be worse. 7th isn't bad. It's not a bad place to be sitting at this point in the season. Again, I remind you all, we had a rough schedule going in. It's going to get easier. We're going to get more wins.
And it's a close 7th. It's not a far away 7th. The West is pretty tight right now.
It really is.
To be right there in the middle of the pack is great.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think that's a solid point. We're 17-15. So we are over 500, which is always a good thing. If we can stay above 500, that's an accomplishment. We've made playoffs many years where we have not been above 500. So staying in that spot is not a bad thing. So we've got if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the games that we've played. I say we, like I'm part of this team, but the games that the Blazers have played since we last talked. So I'm going to go ahead and read them in case you're listening. We played the Spurs and 128 to 112. Then the Mavericks beat us 110 to 130. Then we beat the Rockets 107 to 95. Which was a big game. Oh no, it wasn't that game. It was the next game. Yeah. I was hoping it was going to be the Rockets game because I was secretly awesome. I was kind of hoping you guys would get to go to that, and then he would do it, and your dad could be there, and that would be a really cool thing. But alas,
I think my father did call Chauncey and Dame before the game in Houston, and he was like, "Okay, well, are you going to the game? Are you going to do anything?" Because me and my father watched it together, actually.
Yeah.
And the phone call, I don't know everything about it, but apparently he told me that, Chauncey and Dame asked him, we'd like for you to be there if possible. And the Dame was kind of like saying, like, I'd probably not going to break it tonight.
Right.
And I think he needed like 47 points or something like that.
Yeah, it would have been. It would have been a huge.
Yeah,
he would have had to have quite a night to break that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of season left to go, and that would have been really cool to see. But my father also didn't kind of want to take the attention away from Dame when he wanted it to be his moment. So
I'm happy for him. Really appreciate and respect. I think that's there's always going to be those comparisons, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it on this podcast. There's always going to be those comparisons, but you're right. At the end of the day, this is a huge accomplishment for Dame. And I think I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to get there. Okay. So Trailblazers, Rockets, Trailblazers win 107 to 95. Dame does not break the record that game, but then the next game, Trailblazers Thunder 121 to 123. The Thunder win on a buzzer beater. The Thunder win, but Dame does score his record-breaking point. We'll get to that later. And then a final. I screenshot this yesterday, so it says today, but it was actually yesterday. If you're watching this, anyway. Trailblazers Thunder 98 to 101. The Thunder beat the Blazers again, which I don't think anybody was thrilled about, except for obviously the Thunder. But it was close. It was a close game. You can't be mad at that. So lots going on.
Yeah, definitely a team you don't want to lose to twice.
Especially not in a row.
Yeah, in the West, any team can try to eke out some wins. So I'm just glad we're above 500. And I think if we played the Thunder a third time, we win that game. So
yeah. I have no doubt that in a series we could take them. I think that it obviously we didn't in these. Sometimes I also think like there wasn't as much pressure. There's not as much pressure. Like when there's pressure, this team is a team that when there's pressure, when a championship's on the line, when advancing to the next round is on the line, they perform. But they're sitting comfortably right now, and so it's not quite as much pressure. We have this game. So I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen like we've won big games against like the Phoenix Suns, a lot of these teams and hit big shots. I think whenever you're playing against a team that doesn't have like a bunch of superstars on it, it's kind of like lowers your adrenaline or your excitement, and sometimes they can win. But we were close. Now I'm saying we. Yeah, like if only I hit that shot in the second game.
Listen, you can say we a little more than I can. At least you've played with them. Your dad was on the team. Like you have a little bit more. I'm just like I am not connected to the team at all, and I'm over here like acting like I have some hand in all the games that we win.
Yeah, for me, I was born into the Blazers family.
Right.
So
you can. I think you can say we, and it's legit.
It is out of habit.
But yeah, we're not in a bad. It's just gonna happen. Just everybody just buckle up. This is just it's
part of the Blazers now.
It's our team now. So. We're sitting in a good spot. It's I feel like we say this week after week because it is frustrating to watch the team lose, especially I think when we know that they can win. It's frustrating to watch those losses. But let's talk about this. So big moment for Dame. Damian Lillard, this is an NBA tweet. Damian Lillard passes Clyde Drexler for the most points in Trailblazers franchise history. So first OKC game, the record as it stood, your father's record, was 18,040 points, which is a heck of a lot of points. Oh, I was going to put this other graphic up there and I forgot. But there's a really interesting graphic that we'll have to, maybe I can add it later on Twitter when we post this episode. But there's a really interesting graphic that breaks down the amount of points that were free throws, the amount of points that were 3-pointers, and the amount of points that were 2-point shots. And it's really interesting because, in the day and age that your dad set that record, the 3-point shot was not not nearly as common. Yeah. We talked about that on this podcast before, and he didn't take a lot of those. I've got this in front of me, and when your dad set the record of 18,040 points, 3,798 of those were free throws. For Dame, 4,047 were free throws. So that's pretty even. It's pretty close. For your dad, 1,392 of those points. Only 1,392 of those points were from 3-point shots. That's it. For Dame, 6,687 of those points were 3-point shots. And then for your dad, 12,850 were 2-pointers. And for Dame, 7,314 were 2-pointers. So Dame did this pretty fast. He did it in a significantly lower amount of games, but he took a significantly higher amount of 3-point shots, which is fair. It's legit. It's a fair record, but it's just interesting to me to compare those things.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to kind of how the game has changed. When my father played, obviously the 3-point shot was considered a bad shot.
Right.
So for him, he didn't shoot very many until I think midway through his career, where he started shooting threes. And actually, I think when he was with the Rockets, he actually made the 3-point contest. Oddly enough, I think that's something that a lot of people don't remember him for. Is that we always say he's Clyde the Glide, not for his shooting ability, but for dunking. But even he adapted kind of towards the end of his career, where threes became more of a regular part of an offense.
Yeah.
And Dame takes full advantage of that. And also when you're in an era where, you have more space offensively, guys can't really put a lot of contact on you. I think having the skills to shoot that shot is amazing. And Dame does it night in and night out. So it's really fun to watch. And not only that, I think that's really cool when you compare those numbers. Like
it is. It's interesting.
Yeah, it just like two different eras, and it's very interesting. I want to see the graphic where it's like dunks. How many of those points are dunks?
Yeah, that would be interesting. Because Dame doesn't. He does it. He does it, which is wild when you think about it, because he's not tall. Dame is, I think, 6'2".
Yeah, like 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, and so he's like, when you watch that man dunk, he is flying. Like he's so far off the ground. It's not just a little hop. Like he's flying.
And he's had some posters. He's dunked on quite a few people. And stuff that gets you up out of your seat. So I mean, Dame the Glide.
Hey. But he really has established this whole other, Dame, there's a reason they coined the term Dame time. I mean, obviously I think a lot of that is the clutch shots, but also like logo Lillard. I've heard that a lot. This man shoots from half court. Like he has carved out his own like spot in the NBA. There are not very many people who can do consistently what he does consistently. Steph Curry, obviously those comparisons get made a lot, but he's really doing something that is very unique to his game. And so yes, he has significantly more 3-point shots, but that is his game, and that makes sense for him. And
that's what makes him special. I mean, if it was easy, everyone would do it.
Right.
I mean, I mean, like for me as a professional, shooting from that far away is not something that everyone can do.
No.
It's something you just gifted with, and something you have to put a lot of hours in. And watching him do that on a regular basis, where a lot of players, if they shoot that, are getting tossed out of the game. Bench,
the amount of times that like you would watch him. I remember watching him a couple years ago, and he was just kind of flirting with that half court line with that logo, and he'd get back a little farther and back a little farther, and you could see Stotts just almost kind of like, well, whatever, he's going to shoot the shot. Like, and it's, you know, you hear people talk about how it's a bad shot and whatnot. You hear that from time to time. I've heard people say things like that. And you said a couple episodes ago, you said something about your dad, how he said any shot that goes in, or that any shot you make, good shot. And I've always said that. I've always said, like, it's not a bad shot if you make it. And Dame makes him enough that it's not a bad shot when he takes it anymore.
Anything that goes in. I mean, if you put points on the board, that's the name of the game.
Good shot. So I don't know about you, but when I watched this game, it was like, first of all, I have a bone to pick because I watch a lot of these games at Buffalo Wild Wings. I like to go. I like the atmosphere. I like going and sitting and I live in LA, so it's kind of fun to be like the weirdo rooting for the Blazers. But I watch a lot of these games, and I went to watch Buffalo Wild Wings. They put me in this little corner because it was on Monday night during Monday Night Football, and the Rams were playing, and who cares about the Rams? And they were cheering. I mean, these people were cheering for football like they had scored 47 points. I looked at the scoreboard and it was like 3-6. And they'd been cheering like they'd scored 5 million points. I'm like, you guys are missing out with basketball over here. This is way more exciting. So I went to watch this game, and I got to tell you, it felt like an eternity. Every time he got the ball, it was like, shoot the ball. I was just waiting for him to rack up those points. And he took his sweet time through that game. I think it was it the fourth quarter that he finally made it?
I believe so.
And it was on a free throw, which is kind of poetic, I guess. The fact that he finally gets a foul call and makes this point. So I'm gonna play. If you're watching on YouTube, we've got it here, and if you're listening, you'll get to hear the audio. So here
is Lillard for the record, and he knocks it down. Congratulations to Damian Lillard, knocking it down from the line, 21 points, and he has now moved past Clyde Drexler for the all-time scoring mark in Blazers history.
All right, so I gotta know, Adam. I gotta know, when you said you watched this game with your dad, what was the reaction like for you guys watching this happen? Because it's got to be a little like, there's got to be a part of you that's kind of, I mean, obviously, I'm not doubting that you guys are both happy for him and whatever, but it's got to be kind of a bittersweet feeling.
Like obviously, you know, me being my father's son, I want to see his records stay up forever.
Right.
But I mean, in terms of my father's career and what he's accomplished, like there's so many records that are just, you know, bigger and better that more define his career. Obviously, you know, leading scorer of a franchise is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is a testament to those players back then, that it's taken, you know, such a long time for those records to be broken, even though they've been out of the league. Like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, like last time he played was before I was born.
Right.
I've never gotten to see him play, but he still holds the scoring record and didn't take any threes. So the fact that record has managed to stay up for that long, and you know, a player like LeBron has had to play this long and be great for that long in order to try to break it.
Yeah,
kind of is a testament to these players, and it's also a testament to the players that are breaking those records, that they've been able to kind of break out of the pack. Like Damian Lillard is someone he had to stick with the franchise, first of all, which is difficult in today's NBA, where each player has the potential to leave every season. So it's a testament to him and how he stayed with the team and been able to maintain a level of excellence. So me and my father watching, we're just happy for him. Obviously, we as basketball players ourselves, we understand that, you know, this game is something that people are very prideful about. It's very, you know, it's competitive, and you love to see that people you're doing it for the love of the game. I mean, Dame could have just been like, all right, I don't need to go crazy, or I can just like coast by with this and break it, little by little. But no, he put on a show like he does every night, and that's a testament to his legacy. So, I mean, you can do nothing but clap for somebody like that.
Yeah. It's a wild thing because one of the things that I keep thinking about is the fact that every single time Damian Lillard scores in a Trailblazers jersey from here on out, not every game, every single time that man scores, he's going to break his own record. Every single time. That's wild. And I think, I'm sure that was true for your dad too. He didn't score 1 point above and then quit. But this is also a really interesting, I thought this was worth noting. It comes from Nate Jones on the NBA on Twitter. He says, today, this was tweeted before Dame actually broke the record, but he said, today, Damian Lillard will likely become the Blazers' all-time leading scorer. Huge deal in the era we play in for a superstar to stay in a small market long enough to accomplish something like this. In an era of movement, it will be a record that is very unlikely to be broken. Which I think is just a really, really good point that I mean, your dad's held that record for a long time. And when he was on our podcast before, we talked about the fact that, had Brandon Roy stayed, he might have broken it. Had LaMarcus Aldridge, I believe, is the third. He's
somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think I've got it here. Yeah, he's third. So it's Dame now, your dad, and then LaMarcus Aldridge was at 12,562. And so he's, I mean, this record is far and above like the next person in line, or it was until, Dame did that. But it's there are people who could have done it if they'd stayed long enough. But a big part of this accomplishment to me is the fact that Dame has committed to being with a team and your dad was really a franchise player. I know that he left at the end of his career, and there are people who were bitter, me as a 7-year-old, who were a little bitter about that, but he was a franchise player. He still is talked about as, often the greatest Blazer who ever blazed. And I think that it's just cheesy jokes. But I think that, to have somebody like Dame come in and stay long enough to break that record, especially in the era that we're watching now, where players really switch from team to team often. They don't stay long enough to break records like this.
Yeah, exactly. I think that to me is like that tweet kind of summarizes to me, the more impactful statement about him breaking this record is that in today's NBA, players are given the ability to kind of pick and choose where they want to end up. But also at the same time, teams have changed that the way they operate. Before it was kind of like a team had somebody and they kind of stuck with them, and the fans kind of just were gravitating towards that one player. Yeah. That was their franchise player. Nowadays, teams will trade the entire roster away and try to get some draft picks or do whatever. So I think it's loyalty not only on Damian Lillard's part, which is always a weird topic as a player, but it's also loyalty as a franchise. Because I mean, any franchise in the NBA, it's very common for them to try to trade pieces and try to, revamp their roster or take a different look. And Damian Lillard's been there through some great teams, through some not so great teams. So props to the Portland Trailblazers for being loyal to him, first of all, which I think most fans in the NBA should be aware of whenever they talk about player loyalty. Yeah. I think teams need to be loyal to the players.
That's a point we don't talk about very often. Like, we often hear this narrative about players being loyal or not loyal or skipping around or whatever. But you're right. We don't hear the narrative as often about the fact that teams have some control over that. And obviously, especially now in the culture of the NBA, if a player pushes to leave, I think a lot of times teams try to allow that and work with them, but they don't always. Like, we saw that happen over the summer with KD, who asked out, and they were just like, nope. Same thing happened with Kobe. Kobe tried to leave the Lakers, and the Lakers were like, not letting that happen. But you also see it where guys get traded and they have no say. They would have rather stayed, and the franchise is like, we're done. We're moving in a different direction. And I think that, your dad talked a little bit about that, where he really wanted to stay with the Blazers, but they started to break apart the team.
Yeah.
And so sometimes those decisions are kind of taken out of their hands. And I don't think we hear that side of it as often. This really is a relationship and a two-way partnership. It's not just Dame and it's not just the team. It's both. So
I think like for the team, it's an organization. So you can't, whenever something like that happens, you can't just go point at one guy and be like, you did it. It's kind of the team moving towards something. And whereas the player is a person that you know,
it's easy.
You follow and you see this person playing night in and night out. So it's very easy to assume that they're disloyal or be mad when they choose to leave. Whereas if an organization chooses to go a different way, a lot of people are not mad about that. But I think you have to have kind of just a respect for players, because everyone wants to win. Even my father, like, to me, I'm like, if I'm in his shoes, I'm like, I love the Blazers. I love Portland. Like, why would you ever leave? But to him, he's a competitor. He's not from Portland, and he, grew up in Houston. Yeah. His, one of his best friends, Hakeem, plays there. Right. He's only got so much gas left in the tank. Why not try to win a championship if, he's a competitor? So I think you can't really blame people for pursuing things like that, because the NBA at the end of the day, it's a sport and something we enjoy, but as entertainment. But on the other side of it, it is a business. So
yeah, absolutely,
a little bit of both.
And I think, you and I never really talked about this before because it wasn't happening while we were doing this podcast. But when all the stuff was happening, all the trade rumors around Dame and things like that, I've said over and over and over again, he's earned that right. Like, he's earned the right. If he decided, you know what, I'm done, I want to go somewhere else, he's earned that right. And I think, I tend to think anybody should, when you're talking about something like this with players, this is not just their team. This is the city they live in. This is where their families are, their friends are. This is all these things combined, go into obviously those decisions, as well as the team that they're playing with, the coaching staff, the facility, everything. I'm sure it all plays a role. And I think that players should obviously have some control over that in their lives. But I think especially for a player like Dame, if tomorrow he said, you know what, I'm done, I'm out, which, for the record, for anyone who's listening, we're not implying that that's what's happening or even beginning that narrative. But I am saying, because we're kind of talking about this, that there's a sense in which, like, he should be able to, and fans should be like, you know what, you've given us good time. We appreciated the time you were here. We're slightly bitter because we're going to miss you in a Trailblazers uniform, but we're going to root for you.
I think people forget he's a cultural centerpiece of Portland. Thousands of people flock to the Moda Center to see this man play on a nightly basis. And, when you hold franchise records, you can kind of, you've done a lot for the city and the team. So I don't think anyone could be mad if he wanted to go and try to spend his last few years in the NBA pursuing a ring, which is the last thing left for him to do.
That being said, I
hope he does it with Portland.
Do that. Right.
I hope he does it with Portland.
That being said, we're not trying to start that narrative, guys. We're not.
Oh, not at all. No. I don't see him go.
No, and it's funny too, because there was actually an article that came out earlier this week. I think it was this week. Oh shoot, I just lost it. There was an article that came out on in Dime magazine, which is an Up Rocks. If you're familiar with Up Rocks, it came out through their basketball outlet, Dime magazine, and it was the Lakers trade rumors. That there's all this stuff circulating about the Lakers, and a headline came out that the Lakers would like to trade for Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, or Bradley Beal, and the response was, there was this article that was written, and you can find, I've tweeted it. If you go to my profile, you can find it. But I want to read this one part. The author says, I mean, come on now, stop it, Lakers. Of course you would be interested in any of those three superstars for Russell Westbrook and 2 first-round picks. I'm interested in trading my 2014 Jeep Compass in for a Maserati, but I don't go around telling people that because they'll just laugh at me. And I have some semblance of self-awareness to not even float my pie in the sky scenario. But here's the best part. He says, At least we'll get the 100th interview in which Damian Lillard explains why he doesn't want to leave Portland because of this. So even like people outside the franchise are so tired of that. But it's I think they've moved on. I think people have adjusted to the fact that he's staying, and that's not what we're trying to start here.
People act like other franchises are just like so ready to give up their star player. That's not how it works.
No, well, and it's actually interesting. I want to come back to what we were just talking about, but this is kind of flowing with this. It's interesting because there was a question that was asked of Dame after the Oklahoma game about SGA, because SGA is kind of in a similar situation where Dame has been, where he's really, really playing well. He's somebody that a lot of teams would be interested in, but he's in this small market team that's not really making waves at this point, and they don't really have the people to do that with. And so I think he's developing this kind of similar narrative. And so somebody asked Dame what he thought, what his advice would be. So we're going to play that clip real quick here.
On the record, but I want to ask you about something pertaining to Shea. Throughout your career, there's been a lot of questions like the hashtag free Dame and people trying to get you out of there. But I'm asking that as it pertains to Shea because there's been a lot of the same external pressure. What type of advice would you have for him?
I mean, people have said it to me, and in my career, I've won a lot of games. What I haven't done is won the championship, but we've won, since I've been here. Every year, we've won a lot of games. And my advice would be he's in a situation where he's playing free. They believe in him. He's got a group of guys that understands that, he's the leader, he's the guy. And in the position he's in, his career is in a great position. He's off to a great start, and he's coming into his own with that. And, I would say the grass is not always greener on the other side. You never know what it's going to look like or how the next team might view you, especially when you've had some injuries like he's had. You just don't know. And also, I would tell him that a lot of these people that are saying free him and all of these things or whatever, they are not the people that's going to have to live with the consequences if it doesn't work out. And they're not going to have to ever walk in his shoes. So it's very easy for people to say those types of things when they also know that they won't ever be held responsible or they won't ever be affected by it. So that would be my advice to him.
So it's a really interesting, conversation there. And to that, I wanted to also add this. This was also tweeted by here we go. I use a lot of Nate Jones's tweets. Nate Jones, I believe, is Dame's agent. Or he's somebody I need to find out. I think it's his agent. But he said he retweeted this video and he said, seeing a lot of how would he know responses to this, which I also saw a lot of, like, how would Dame know? He's only been at one team. He doesn't know what it's like to go to another team. And Nate says he has eyes, talks to a lot of faces in franchise that have moved on. It's worked out for a few guys, but many wish they would have stayed in the place they built their name. Therefore, the grass is not always greener. So it's an interesting topic. It's an interesting topic.
And he brings up great points. A lot of things people really don't think about as fans. Like, I know, like, I have been a victim of it too, where I've been like daydreaming, oh, wouldn't it be really cool to have this star player join our team or have this player join? And that's kind of not how basketball works. Like, you can't just throw a bunch of
no, it's not.
Yeah. I wish it was like Voltron where you just connect players and they just get better. But sometimes it's a team dynamic. Sometimes you need role players to highlight star players.
Look at the Lakers.
Look at the Lakers. I think Russell Westbrook is a prime example, kind of what Damian Lillard's talking about, where sometimes the grass is not always greener on the other side, and like the fans don't have to live with the consequences. Obviously, when the Lakers first thought about this, they're like, "Oh, we're getting a superstar, Mr. Triple Double, Russell Westbrook." And I think the weirdest part about it is that Russ has always played the way he plays. He didn't really change anything. It's just people demonize him for it. But you look at the year before, he he went to Washington and made the playoffs. By the way, Washington has had their franchise player, Bradley Beal, who's played there for about 10 years, and they've never had a problem with Bradley Beal. Russell Westbrook came in and made the playoffs for them, and they had a problem with him. So, yeah, I think in that case, whereas OKC worshiped the ground he walked on.
Right.
Yeah, it's just kind of a
they
weird.
Still do. If you talk to OKC fans, they still think Russell Westbrook is the greatest thing that ever existed. So I wonder sometimes. I often wonder what would have happened if he had stayed. And I say all the time, because people are like, well, what do we do with him now? Like, where does he go? What happens now? And I keep saying, I honestly think that he needs to go back and finish his career in OKC.
Or just really go wherever you're wanted, or wherever you can be free. And that's with the NBA. I think players, they get into a situation and people tell them, oh, go pursue, the bigger, better team. But sometimes the situation is just right. And that's what works for you. And I think Damian Lillard with Portland, that works for him. He knows his role. He knows what he can deliver on a nightly basis. And he knows that the team has got his back no matter what, and the city. So who wants to leave that?
Yeah. I mean, not me. I wouldn't. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit, because there's this kind of interesting conversation that I think is worth having. And I will be the first to say that, like, I hate the comparison game. I always like people, because anytime I do a podcast or an interview or anything like that, people will ask me things like, well, how do these two players compare? Or who's the greatest trailblazer, or who's whatever? And I hate those conversations. I remember when all the narrative was going on about Dame and Steph and all the comparisons. Well, which is better? Well, which is this? And it's like, I really like Damian Lillard. I also really like Steph Curry. Both of them, I really enjoy watching them, and I really enjoy their game. And I don't want to compare them. Same thing with Michael Jordan and LeBron. I don't want to make that. I don't want to have that argument. Like, they can both be great players. They can both be essentially the best in a lot of aspects. Like, I don't like these conversations. So this is not a conversation of who's the greatest trailblazer who ever was. We're not going to do that. But I do think it's worth having a conversation of what's the definition or the criteria of an all-time great trailblazer, because we've had a lot that get mentioned.
Yeah, if only the rest of the world shared your viewpoint on that, it would save us a lot of wasted time watching sports shows debate this.
It would also ruin a lot of networks.
We have nothing to talk about. Just be like, all right, so the weather.
Right. It's a weird dynamic. It's snowing where this team is playing today. It's a weird dynamic, or like a weird combination, because I'm incredibly competitive, and I think a lot of times people who watch sports because they want their team to win, and so there's always this ongoing, well, we got to talk about who's the best. We got to have who's the best. It's like this, always this competition. And I get it because we're talking about sports. We're literally talking about competition. So I get it. And everybody enjoys it differently. And there's nothing wrong with having those conversations. Like we just said, like, those fuel the majority of sports media. If we weren't having those debates, sports media wouldn't exist.
Or the locker rooms wouldn't exist, because that's about all we talk about in the locker room. Being a player myself, we just sit there and debate players all day. Yeah.
So I know it happens. I think when we started this podcast, one of the things that I really aimed for was I wanted it to be something that was easy to listen to. I wanted people of all levels of basketball knowledge to be able to sit down and listen to it and understand what was being said. And I wanted it to be fun, because it sometimes gets old listening to people just bag on how the team's doing, or what's going on here, or what's going on there. And so I think a lot of it was just like, I don't want to do that. Like, I really want to enjoy these conversations. And I think that was one of the reasons that, you were so great for this too, because I think you tend to, I mean, we'll have those debates.
Yeah. I don't like to compare either. I'm of a similar mind. I think the easiest way to do it is to let the viewer kind of, or the listener kind of decide for themselves, and kind of just break down what exactly would be the criteria for somebody like that. So I think whenever you're breaking down a franchise, and that franchise's best player, ever of all time. You have to like think about it in terms of categories. So let's just take winning. You know, how far into the playoffs have you gotten? How far have you taken the team?
Right.
You know, at what point did you take that team to where it is? And then also you obviously look at the records. That's one thing that's important. It ties into it.
Yeah.
But then you look at the time that they were with the team.
Yeah.
So with the Blazers, you have, you know, quite a few candidates.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you got
Bill
my
Walton.
father. Yeah, Bill Walton is often regarded as the one or the two in terms of best Blazer ever because he did win a championship.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I think part of this conversation too is often who you grew up watching. Because I never talk about Bill Walton as being the greatest trailblazer, even though obviously he was one of them because of his accomplishments. He accomplished things that nobody else did. Well, people on that team, but no other star player accomplished on this team. So you have to have him in that conversation. But I didn't watch him. I didn't grow up watching him play. I grew up watching Clyde. And so to me, that the nostalgia was there. You know, I watched him be great. And so for me in that conversation, you could never convince me that anybody else was better than Clyde because that's who I grew up watching. And I think you can, a lot of times when people are having this conversation, you can kind of tell a little bit what, like their age, because you can tell who they're talking about in this conversation. You know, are they talking about Bill Walton? Are they talking about Brandon Roy? Are they talking about LaMarcus Aldridge? Who are they talking about? And I think that plays to it because I also think that regardless of how competitive you are, regardless of how much you want to win, nostalgia and the team that you fell in love with, regardless of when that was, if that was when you were a kid, if it was when you were an adult, that's going to impact how you view players as well. I think
definitely. And in my case, like I've been fortunate enough to have, you know, grown up, you know, with a Hall of Fame dad, but also grown up watching Damian Lillard play.
Right.
So I kind of got the best of both worlds and also got to meet Bill Walton. And a father that, you know, all he does is spout praise about some of these other players that, you know, my generation didn't get to grow up watching. So
because he probably did. He probably watched it.
Definitely. And my father is one of those people, like a lot of people from his era that played, you know, they don't think of LeBron or Jordan as the best player ever. They think of, you know, Wilt and Kareem and guys like that. So it's just a totally different perspective. And I think for me, I'm of the mind that like, okay, we can't, there's no one's ever going to just be able to sit there and like, for sure, no debate, this person's the best ever. But I think, like my father, Damian Lillard, and Bill Walton are obviously some of the best Blazers ever. Now, Damian Lillard, on the other hand, has more career left to go. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I think, if he goes and wins a championship with the Blazers, leads the team to a championship, then I would safely say yes. Okay, the best Blazer. But
he's
for now,
done all
the rest,
things.
the rest is unwritten right now. So we kind of got to see. And then who knows in the future? There might be someone else that comes in and you know, breaks a scoring record or breaks wins a championship, and then we'll have this debate again. You, the listener, will be on episode 5,000, and it'll be great.
Well, and I think too, you know, there are also people that you could put in this conversation as Blazer greats who maybe aren't the greatest, but they are definitely part of the conversation. And those are the guys like Brandon Roy or LaMarcus Aldridge, you know, the guys that really had successful careers there. And I think especially with guys like Brandon Roy, where his career was ended because of an injury, like you think about the what ifs with that, like he could have gone and, you know.
Yeah. And he was my favorite player growing up. That was my favorite player. So it's one of those things where, to me, no one could convince me that anyone was better than Brandon Roy at the time.
I
was on the, like, I loved watching him play. I modeled my game after him. So I think it really does come down to, like you said, who you watched. Yeah. But also having an appreciation for each of those players, which is that's an incredible feat to be one of the best
Yeah.
ever at something. So,
well, and I also think too, like, you know, Bill Walton paved the way for Clyde, and Clyde paved the way for, you know, Brandon Roy and Damian Lillard. And I think there's this, you know, there had to be someone before. Like there had to be someone before. And I think it's really cool that basketball is new enough and the NBA is new enough that these guys, at least for the Blazers franchise, are still around. A lot of them. I mean, there obviously some are no longer with us, but a lot of them are still around, and you still get to kind of hear their perspective on things as these records get broken and things like that. And it's such a cool thing to get to witness. I got emotional like when he broke, which is, I mean, I cry at commercials, so it's really not a big deal. But like I was watching it and I started to get emotional because I'm sitting there thinking like, I was thinking about the fact that like I grew up watching your dad. I grew up watching Clyde, and that shaped and formed so much of my Blazers fandom and my basketball fandom. And you know, I largely am where I am and doing what I'm doing because of him and him being on that team. And I you know, I watched him beat that record, and I watched him be that player. And now as an adult, I'm watching and she wasn't with me at the time that this happened, but I'm watching my daughter around the age that I was now watching Dame do it. And I'm watching her attached to Dame in the same way that I was attached to Clyde as a player. Like she told me the other day, she's like, Mom, I just want to let you know that if Dame ever goes to another team, I'm not going to be a Trailblazer fan anymore. I'm going to have to be a fan of that team. And I was that kid when Clyde went to the Rockets. I was a Rockets fan for a few years, much to my parents' demise. So I think that, you know, there's this really cool thing about being, especially for people who have been fans since, you know, we were kids and now we're adults and we're watching our kids experience this and we're getting to see history be made. And how often does that happen with a team? Like where you have these things. I mean, I guess every team has records and they get broken and whatever, but a lot of teams, they have records and they stand for a long time because of what we talked about earlier with players moving around. So it really is so cool for us to get to witness this happening. And just to, you know, what an honor it is to watch players like Damian Lillard do what he's doing in Portland. It's just really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to add? This episode is heavily about Dame, but I think we kind of knew going into this that was going to be the story tonight. Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
I think we covered it, and that you brought up some great points, and I totally agree with it. Yeah. And the viewers can always decide, like, if you are a viewer and you disagree, that's okay too. You're allowed to have, I mean, it's sports. It's kind of what you make it. It's entertainment, and it's what you derive from it that you enjoy about it. So.
And just because we don't want to debate it doesn't mean you can't.
Like, you can go and debate all you want.
and tag us. Like, I want to hear it. I'm curious. I'm always curious to hear, you know, the things that people think about.
Yeah, maybe I'll start up a poll.
Are you sure you want to touch that?
We'll see. If it gets too hot, we'll put it out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Adam, I think this is really cool. I always appreciate your insight. And I always, especially right now when we're talking about all this stuff that so directly impacts you and your family, it's such a privilege to week after week get to kind of hear your perspective of it. That's such a different perspective than anybody else gets to have. So I always appreciate you being candid and open about that and willing to talk about it. Makes it really, really interesting. So thanks.
Oh yeah, I'm always welcome to share, and for anyone, you know, viewing or listening, I mean, me and Dia love talking basketball, so I mean, just hit us up with any questions or anything.
We gotta get you more active on Twitter, because I think about that a lot. You gotta work yourself into debates. Just start jumping in. Just start jumping in, Adam. Just throw yourself. That's how it works. That's how I end up in debates. I insert myself into other people's conversations constantly. so
maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'm just gonna find like a whole bunch of Blazers polls and debates and just like throw my 2 cents in.
I'm gonna start tagging you. If you guys are on Twitter, tag Adam. He will definitely respond. It's always interesting to see, the things you have to say. I think, again, you have a unique perspective, so we got to drag him into Twitter and get him more involved on there, because I've heard his perspectives and they're interesting. Okay, so we have Adam on Twitter. You can find him at Drex Glides and then the number 2. You can find me at Deandra Ann. We tag us, whatever. We, like Adam said, it's always interesting conversation, and a lot of times we use stuff. I'm always looking for tweets to use on the show, and as conversation starters. So you can always tag us in things, and we may end up using those. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, the podcast feed, all that stuff, so you don't miss episodes. We try to put out videos and things to kind of let you know when they're posting, but every now and then we don't, so you don't want to miss them. Make sure you're subscribed. We appreciate all your support as we get this up and running. Episode 8, it's a wrap. We'll see y'all next time.
You're listening to Shooting Hoops with your hosts, Dia Miller and Adam Drexler.